All right. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live here on June 24th, 2025. NHL Draft Week is here. Welcome to the show, everybody who's already in here on YouTube, or if you're watching over on Twitter. If you're watching on Twitter, come over into YouTube, hit the chat, do all that good stuff. And on your way, and if you could, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, all that usual nonsense that I tee up every week here. If you're new to the show, I'm your host, Kris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects. And with me, as always, the handsome gentleman, much younger, no wrinkles, no crow's feet. That is your Sabres beat writer for The Athletic, Matthew Fairburn. You can find all of Matthew's work at theathletic.com/Sabres. Running a little late tonight. Wanted to be starting right at 8 o'clock on the notes, but Matthew and I had to exchange stories about standing in front of sprinklers, having faulty air conditioning on my side, me being a prick to my coworkers all day long as a result of it. Wonderful stories that we had to exchange to get those out of the way. And I also just downed a hot coffee. Should have went with the cold brew, Matthew Fairburn, but I can feel a little bead of sweat now run off the side of my face. So that's fun. Let's get into it today.
Before we begin, is wondering why Kris is sweating, his HVAC is broken. So if you were on the fence about giving a super chat, Kris has his HVAC is broken, so keep that in mind. I mean, the poor guy, it's like 80 degrees in his office up there.
Or if there's an AC compressor that fell off the back of a truck and you happen to be in that business, hit me up. But at any rate, so hit the like button, because the like button will help also. But before we begin, I did the subscribe. You can find the audio version of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star review. And I think that's it. We appreciate that, right, Matthew Fairburn? All right, let's just get to it. I'm frazzled. I'm hot, but we're going to stick with it here. And I got this big, burning sun of a ring light shining right on my face. That's not helping either. Oh, it's going to be a fun one. I might be a prick to you, Matthew. We'll see how it goes.
I hope so.
But at any rate,
I'm here for it.
As I mentioned right at the top, NHL Draft Week. This is going to be fun. Today, down at One Bills Drive, Kevin Adams and Jerry Fortin, his assistant general manager and kind of the head honcho of the amateur scouting department, met with the media today. As always, a fun press conference, a fun environment when Kevin Adams gets in front of the media. Matthew Fairburn, you were on site. Let's just kind of start there high level. You were there along with, Harrington and Warrow and Muirden and, Kukla, Fran and Ollie. I'm sure everybody was out. The camera guys were there from the TV stations. Everybody was having fun. Just your thoughts on Kevin, his message today. I wasn't expecting a lot, but we got a little bit more maybe than what was asked in terms of some news from Kevin and his thoughts on how the media has been talking about the Buffalo Sabres thus far this offseason.
Yeah, that was interesting, I guess. I wasn't really expecting that there's been a lot out there about the Sabres. So I guess it's natural that some of it might fall into the category of misinformation, as Kevin Adams labeled it today. There's a lot of people throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, I think, but a lot of the stuff, the legitimate stuff circulating about the Sabres has been from, reputable insiders, right? Like, I think if it's coming from Elliot Friedman or Frank Saravalli or Chris Johnston or Pierre LeBrun, these are guys that are doing an honest job, that are careful about what they put out there. Everybody's got a different sliding scale of how careful they are, but I think particularly CJ and Pierre have been pretty measured at The Athletic and talking about the Sabres. I feel like as a whole, we've been fairly measured there. I was trying to pinpoint the root of the frustration. I was actually doing that before we went live, trying to figure out where are some of these things that are causing the most frustration for Kevin Adams, these memos that are hitting his desk that are causing, this misinformation, causing him to have sympathy for the fans, all these things. I think it's Saravalli was the root of the Samuelson buyout chatter. I know we had a story at The Athletic last week about potential buyout candidates from Harmon and Thomas Drance out in Vancouver, which was more them looking at who would make sense. I had, written about Samuelson only to note that the buyout window was open and that if there was a candidate, he's the one, but that they like him and that, they still have some degree of faith in him. But depending on how the blue line shakes out, I think that's what took me aback about the Samuelson comment, is that it was ridiculous. The idea was ridiculous, and that they have not even had the conversation once. I walked away from that thinking, okay, at some point you must have discussed trading him or something. Like you're not trying to give any hint that you're going to buy him out because you want to keep the option open to trade him. Now, do they even want to do that? I don't know. But the idea, I think it's just, I'm not even taking it at face value to say that they've never had the conversation about buying out Samuelson. Like, how could you not? How could it not come up in hours and hours and hours of meetings that these people, I mean, think about how much you and I talk about the Sabres on and off air and how much we think about them. To think that would, and then think about how much they do, right? It's their entire livelihoods. It's how they spend every single waking hour, I would think. And to think it never comes up, it's not even, to me, not even believable. I mean, this is the last chance you have to buy him out at a third of his total salary and to save $3.7 million on the cap for the next 5 years. Like, it's a legitimate mechanism you have to save some money. And your blue line is like the main focus of the offseason. So I'm trying not to read too much into that part of it. To me, that was cover for potential trade talks. Are they going to trade him? I don't know. I don't think so. But the idea that it's ridiculous, the thought of them getting bought out is ridiculous. It's just not. It's not ridiculous at all. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it's not ridiculous. It's a legitimate savings on a legitimately underwhelming player.
I will argue that he's not doing his job, given how cheap it is to do it right now, and there's a limited window for that cost to buy him out. If he's not at least thinking about it when doing an audit with both Eric Stahl and Jarmo Kekalainen, doing an audit of your roster and just talking about the financial implications of the player's contract. You're not just doing an evaluation, you're doing a salary financial analysis of the player too. And my immediate thought, you already hit my immediate thought, because he voluntarily served that up. No one asked him about Samuelson.
I was planning to ask, but we also we had such a finite amount of time that Bo and Byram didn't even come up.
Which is wild, right? Yeah.
And not really, I was sort of being selective, right? I was like, I'm going to ask about Tuck, and we got to ask a little bit about the draft because that's this weekend. So we need some, it was knowing what comes up and what doesn't. Like Bo and Byram didn't come up. So there's a chance that we wouldn't have gotten to Matthias Samuelson. That might have been one that we earmarked and said, hey, post-draft, we can ask about this because the deadline's the 30th, and they're not going to do anything. I mean, they waited till the 11th hour on Skinner to make that official when it was pretty telegraphed ahead of time. Like, if they were actually considering this with Samuelson, it's not happening till then. So theoretically, he wouldn't even have been asked about this.
It was interesting, though, that he voluntarily served it up. Because of that maybe you hit my initial thought already, was it either blew up a deal or it's it's tamped down some of the conversations that he's had about him being included in a deal. Because he had like this tone about him when it came up, and it was just, kind of flippant and just like kind of annoyed. And I mean, maybe he pays a lot of attention to the noise, and maybe it's getting to him. I don't know. But I tend to think that there was something else going on behind that really caused that frustration to come out voluntarily.
It could also be, like I said, I traced this best as I can, and somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but best as I can, the root of the frustration or the initial reports seems like Saravalli. Like the first I can see somebody mention like that they actually discussed it, or that, it was, something. And I think Frank runs into the problem where he says a lot of things. Some of them he's reporting, some of them he's opining. But he has fallen into the category where aggregators take everything he says as a report. And so I don't want to misconstrue what he did or didn't say, but my best guess is that his is the report that Kevin is calling ridiculous. And it could be, if we're playing some insider baseball stuff, that it's actually not the Samuelson thing that's pissing him off.
Well, that's where
Saravalli has a lot of stuff on the Sabres right now, and it's not making Kevin's life any easier, right? He was leading the charge on JJ Peterka.
Nice segue. Yeah.
JJ Peterka is the biggest headache that Kevin Adams has right now. And it's not Saravalli's fault, but he's the first one to mention him at the trade deadline. He put him number one on the trade board at the beginning of the offseason. Like, so maybe it's a way to, because this is the other thing. Like, it wasn't just that, oh, there's no truth to that. Like, haven't talked about buying out. Not something we've seriously considered. It was somebody who has no idea what they're talking about said, we're discussing this. And so it's like, okay, this seems personal. Like, you're upset about somebody or someone. Like I said, for a second, I thought, well, I wrote about that over the weekend. Is he pissed off about something I wrote? Like, I don't know. That's why I was kind of trying to find the root of that. But it was weird in an answer to JJ Peterka where if you're going to refute information, there's a lot of misinformation out there. For instance, this Samuelson thing. It was a question about JJ Peterka. Is there misinformation about JJ Peterka out there? Because he didn't offer any specifics on what was and wasn't misinformation. Kevin Adams had 30 minutes today, and JJ Peterka and his camp have had, weeks since it's been out there from various people. Saravalli and Elliot Friedman have both noted that he's not particularly happy, right? Would welcome a change of scenery. He's not happy. Known to be unhappy, I believe, might have been the phrase that Friedman used. Has anybody refuted that? Kevin didn't refute it. Peterka hasn't refuted it. Peterka's camp hasn't refuted it in any way. And so, all Kevin Adams did was, I thought somewhat, I don't know if naive is the right word, or odd question from Paul Hamilton of like, he didn't seem unhappy at his exit interview with the media. Like, was he unhappy at his exit interview? I was like, well, of course he doesn't seem unhappy at his media thing. He's not going to stand up there and be like, I want to get the hell out of here. I guess some guys have done that over the course of time with the Sabres, but the exit interview isn't really germane here. Like, it's not really the issue. I don't really care how, I guess it's, Kevin Adams said that it was a positive meeting with JJ and everything, all that, but I don't know. We've gotten to this point and nobody's refuting that he's unhappy. Question is, how unhappy, what's making him unhappy, and can they fix it? Otherwise, I guess we'll see.
Peterka. So we spent a lot of time talking about Peterka last time we were together. It was a couple days after we were together that actually the reports started coming out about Peterka a little bit more. I think that was Saravalli, to your point. Good segue, by the way, because that's where I was going with this. Was Saravalli, you already capsulized Saravalli's role in this whole Peterka rumor mill thing. And I do believe that that's the root of it. Kevin's position today was pretty professional regarding Peterka, but if you're reading between the lines, which I like to do, I expect Peterka to be moved.
I do,
because he
well.
didn't refute, and that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm good with it. I know a lot of Sabres fans aren't, but I think on the Peterka thing, okay, so let's go back to the Hamilton question, where JJ didn't seem unhappy. The fact that JJ didn't seem unhappy might be part of the problem that I have with JJ. I want him unhappy. He was probably happy to be getting out of here. Potentially, like, oh, it's over. I can go back to Germany or whatever. Go hang out in Switzerland for a while. Who knows, right? I don't want to like do any kind of character assassination or anything like that with Peterka. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I just think that there's always been something that hasn't felt right. And I think now that Kevin knows it, and he's not going to say it to you guys, the assembled media today.
Nor should he. Yeah, should he.
No,
like,
he shouldn't. Don't negotiate with a player in the media. Don't tip your hand. Anything
the
else?
no trade has happened. No, and there's no guarantee that a trade will happen. So I think you don't want to make it messier than you need to make it. And he didn't make it messier today with JJ Peterka. So let's zoom out for a second. And Kevin Adams has reached a point entering year 6 because of a variety of factors going back to how he got the job that he inherited, the owner he works for, the job he's done over the last 5 years, some of the things that he said. He has reached a point where I am convinced that he can't say anything and come out like winning anybody over. I truly believe that. And I'm not saying anything he said today should win anybody over, but people go into these looking for reasons to bury him. And we're going to get to some things that I didn't really like. But what I will say is he did not make the Peterka situation messier, and he could have in a million different ways today. And that was the last thing that you want to do, because either way, whether you keep him or trade him, saying stuff about it today hurts both of those. Trying to make it messy today would hurt both of those potential outcomes. If you're keeping him, you better make sure he's happy. You better make sure he's bought in. Because you don't want any sort of tension lingering into the season. If you're trading him, you want his value as high as possible. So if you make it messy today and talk about, well, he's not happy or this or that, that does nobody any good either. So from just a brass tacks hockey perspective, the most important thing facing the team right now is Peterka. He didn't make it messier. Low bar, but he cleared it, right? So that, low bar, fully acknowledge that. But he didn't make that particular situation messier. And frankly, that's the most important thing facing this team. The Samuelson stuff is poor messaging and probably not telling the whole truth. And either that or completely ridiculous that they're not even talking about it, because that's their job to talk about it. But that is sort of small potatoes to me compared to Peterka, which is the main event of the offseason. More important than the draft, more important even probably than free agency. Like that, what happens there is super important. So he did his best to kind of dance around it and divert and all this. And then I brought up Tuck later on, and it was immediate, like, he wants to be here. He knows he's a priority. Much different tone. With Peterka, it was, how do I just say a bunch of words to get this over with without saying anything? And I guess he kind of did that. How
he answered other questions leads me down the path that JJ, that's my position on JJ, or just my belief that he will be moved. And JJ's the one I think that could make this messy because he doesn't have a ton of leverage. He could just not sign an offer, take it into the season, doesn't have arbitration rights. To your point about the value, that's exactly where I'm at, and that's exactly why I feel he should be moved. Forget about unhappiness or anything else. He's your best opportunity to make the team better. We've been saying that for a while before this notion that he might not be happy in Buffalo even came out more broadly in the media. Saravalli, others. Elliot Friedman was actually the one that made the report on 32 Thoughts a couple days after you and I were last together that really mentioned that Kevin was ready to start listening. Do I think they want to trade him? No. Do I think they will? Yes. And the sooner, probably the better.
I think so. I mean, I've reached a point where I have to believe you can get a return that's worth it. And I have to believe that you can get a return that makes your team potentially better. And if you can't, I don't know what you're doing in the job. I get the idea that there's a lot of teams in the league that want to get better right now, and not teams that are, this will turn into more of an NHL wide rant, but this idea that well, the Penguins are looking to sell off pieces, but no other team is obviously trying to enter a rebuild. Well, who says that it has to be one or the other?
No, it doesn't. That's
A
my
team can
whole-
get better by acquiring JJ Peterka and getting rid of some other pieces that they have a surplus of. That they like, two teams can get better in a deal or think they got better in a deal. It's not ridiculous to think that way.
Hey,
And
listen, man. I just think that 15 teams in the league are going to want in on this guy.
At least. I mean,
and you're going to get a smorgasbord of deals to look at. You can get 1-for-1s. If you're Buffalo and you have the taxes and the palm trees and everything else, I said I wasn't ever going to say palm trees again. There I go. I broke my own rule. I'm going to put a quarter in the jar. But you could get 2 players for 1 JJ, and that solves some issues. You're just not going to get your futures. Chicago, maybe 3's in play. I would look at that. I mean, that there's going to be different types of deals. But go ahead. I just wanted to get in on that.
Utah has 4. Like, I'm not out on deals that include a top 4 or 5 pick. Or we've talked about Byram deals that would maybe involve moving up. Do these happen often? No. Do players like JJ Peterka and Bowen Byram become available on the trade market that often? No. But that's a unique situation to Buffalo right now. Peterka is not. So Shayna Goldman and I did a trade targets piece on Peterka Monday morning and identified some teams that would make sense. But also Shayna had in there some contract comparables and noted that the bet that the Sabres are making is not or whatever team signs him is not a sure thing. I think people look at it and say, oh, 7 by 7 or 8 by 8, like whatever contract, he's going to fall somewhere in that 7 to 8 million range, most likely, is like a no-brainer. And I'm not sure that it is, given how your team is constructed. For another team, it might be. Like, it might fit. But given how your team is constructed and the elements that you're missing, the positions you're missing, but also the elements, the well-rounded 200-foot game, the hard on the forecheck, the net front presence, like all these things, those aren't JJ Peterka. He's a net negative defensively. And he has racked up counting stats and turned into quite the offensive player. Like he creates a lot of offense on the rush, and he's a good playmaker, good shooter, pretty good on the power play, but their power play stinks. So I guess I'm looking at it and thinking, you move out this player and bring in some elements that you don't have, you can make your team better. He's a good player. He's a great asset.
Goes to the next level with him either. It's not like Thompson takes his game to the next level.
No, we were. I wrote over the weekend about Tage Thompson's better with Zach Benson on the left wing than he is with JJ Peterka. And all the talk. This is what I find interesting, is that I won't lump everybody into the same bucket, but by and large, I would say the analytics crowd is higher on Peterka than Byram. And a lot of times what gets brought up is the fact that Byram is not as good away from Dahlin, or he wasn't last year. Those splits in terms of expected goal share were pretty bad. The splits for Peterka with and without Tage Thompson were worse. Like it was bad. And Zach Benson splits with and without Tage Thompson is like you don't even notice. Zach Benson is just good in terms of his overall impact on the game. If you take expected goal share, it's one metric, but it encompasses a lot. So you're thinking about piecing together lines, building a team. Peterka was a home run draft pick, a success story in development that they haven't had enough of. But let's not pretend that you can't make your team better by moving him. And if you add in the element of him potentially being unhappy, and you want to carry that into the season, and what contract are you signing him to? Think about the money that you free up if you move him out. What that helps you potentially bring back. A few of the teams that we brought up we can run down in the trade targets piece, like Toronto. You know, you go get a Brandon Carlo and something else. Now, on the surface, people are like, Brandon Carlo for JJ Peterka. It's like, well, you want your big, defensive, physical, right shot defenseman who's 28, making a little more than $3 million. Like that's that's an asset, right?
He's a long 6'5" too, by the way. Long arms, longer than normal. Yeah.
And, he would really, I think, stabilize your top four in a big way. Rasmus Anderson is number one on Kris Johnston's trade board right now in Calgary.
Yes,
sounds like they've hit an impasse on contract talks. Like, that's a right shot defenseman, finished the season on a broken leg, kind of has that warrior mentality that you talk about looking for in a defenseman. Also has some offense to his game, like a legit top four guy. He's going to need a contract after next year, but that's another player. We've talked about Kesselring. We've talked about the Fitz in Pittsburgh, maybe Brian Rust plus. Like, this isn't going to be a Jack Eichel return. We shouldn't expect that type of return, but it could be a pretty damn good return. And you could start to round out a team. And if you don't do Peterka or you don't do Byram, which Byram is more complicated. Like, I'm not all the way there on trading Byram, but it feels like Byram might be more likely. Like, CJ's latest trade board has Byram number 2.
2, yes.
And as we talked about last week, like, Kreider was number 1 on that board, and then he got traded. Like, Kris Johnston's trade board is not him, scrolling around Puckpedia and trying to find interesting names to put on there. Like,
it's well sourced.
Yeah, it's
right,
and it's ranked, in a way. So yeah, the Byram stuff. Are they more likely to trade Byram than Peterka according to that board, right? But that's not as simple a situation to me, because now you're creating another hole potentially. Definitely not buying out Samuelson, so I guess you put him up there. I don't know, but you need a couple of defensemen, right? And makes things a little bit trickier. So all this to say, what a fascinating week it's going to be.
Oh no, it's going to be fun as hell, man. Okay. Let's put a bow on this Peterka thing real quick. There was another report, I don't know who it was, said the Sabres are looking to add 2 top 6 forwards. That could be 2 new faces minus a JJ, right? We talk about Zach Benson. Benson did lead the team last year. Corsi for percentage, I know it's not the best indicator, but it is an indicator of shot attempts, right? Expected goals for, 3rd on the team, scoring chances for, and it didn't really matter who his centerman was. But you don't want to put all your eggs in a Zach Benson basket, right? So you got to go out and get more bodies. I like the idea of, and I don't want to repeat everything I said last week. I have a greater desire, me personally, to move a Peterka. And I think Byram is a guy, give him good, fair value, a couple years. And I think that he would fall in line and be like, Bo, maybe he wants out. If he wants out, I'm in no hurry to move him. I will move him if I have to, but earn your way out, or help us move you.
Play your way
Come
out.
back, play your way out of here.
Like,
I'm
you
not
got
willing
2
to
years.
do that. I don't think with Peterka as much. I mean, if push comes to shove, I would personally. I'm not eager to do that, because I think where there's smoke, there's fire.
Well, and like I said, they have
could
every
be
chance.
Problematic, and the return diminishes potentially.
They've had every chance to refute it, and nobody on either side has. It's very easy to do. And Peterka's agent is, Alan Walsh, who he's not known for being shy. So I feel like, if they wanted to refute it, they could refute it. And to your point, I think Bowen Byram has more of a track record of going about his business. And I think there's just a maturity to Bowen Byram that he's not that much older than Peterka, but he's been through life a little bit more in terms of, he had some injury stuff. He's been traded before. Like, we've seen how he's handled some of this stuff. He got traded to Buffalo and took it in stride and quickly became one of the favorite guys in the locker room. We just don't have that body of evidence with JJ Peterka that he could not get what he wants and come in here and not they're talking about the culture, right? And actually, Byram's agent has refuted that he asked for a trade. So,
His new agent.
His new agent. So he's at least put that out there, and maybe to try to quiet things down a little bit. But
he's still two. It doesn't mean that Buffalo doesn't want to
no,
trade.
it doesn't. It doesn't mean he won't get traded, or that, it also doesn't mean that he doesn't want to be traded.
But
right?
that does mean that you can keep him, though. It's kind of
just quieting the noise. He doesn't want that idea out there, and would make him, I think, easier to bring back. I mean, he is just different personalities. So that's why I say Adams, if they bring Peterka back, he has a lot of work to do, or he has to be certain that it's going to work in the room and it's going to work on the ice, and the whole dynamic culture-wise is going to be okay, whether that means making Peterka happy, whether that means, I don't know if even selling it to the room or what. Just the whole thing has to be managed properly. And bringing him back is tough after a summer like this, I would imagine. It's kind of like Martin Necas last year, and then he ended up getting traded in season, right? Like, he was making it clear he wasn't going to sign long-term. Like, that's the leverage piece that these guys have. If Peterka's not going to sign long-term, then what do you do if you're the Sabres, right? When's the right time to pull the plug? It feels like this is a sky-high value right now.
I would, there's one scenario, I think about the offer sheet situation a lot with Peterka. I don't think if he looks at one, he has to be careful, right? Because I think there's a higher probability that the Sabres would match a longer term offer sheet than a shorter one. A team could come in, give them big money for a couple of years and block the Sabres out potentially. And that's the one scenario that scares me. But again, beat the whole situation to the punch, and maybe there's a move to be made before.
Yeah,
maybe July
like
1st.
I said, the return might not, it's hard on paper sometimes to win these deals. Like I said, like Brandon Carlo might not blow people away, but like, it's kind of like the Savoy McLeod thing, right? Like, initially you're like, Savoy for McLeod. McLeod's a third line center, but like, go find the McLeod right shot defenseman who can be number 4 next to Power. Go find that guy, and a winger who can sort of slide up and down your lineup and maybe fill the Peterka spot or a spot on the, second line left wing. I think you can accomplish that. And maybe it's not out there. Maybe you got to dig in. Maybe it extends beyond July 1, right? Maybe it extends into the summer, and you have to figure out, Pierre LeBrun has brought up that there could be a longer runway of NHL offseason than years past.
Yeah.
That's fine too. Offer sheets start to come into play. To your point, you're risking that. The short-term offer sheet is the risk here. The long-term one is a favor to the Sabres. It's like, okay, cool. Thanks for doing the negotiating for us. We'll match that and see if somebody wants to trade for him if it's that ugly. Like, I don't think Peterka would even go down that road if he's really unhappy, because he's got to
be careful. Yeah.
The offer sheet has to be the right one. And I think it might be worth the risk if you're JJ Peterka and his camp to take a 2 to 4 year offer sheet that you think the Sabres aren't going to match, and say, worst case scenario is I'm here until I'm a UFA. Like, if that's a bet he's willing to take, maybe something happens. Look, like I said, we don't know exactly the root of all this. Does JJ Peterka want to win? Probably to an extent. Does he want to be in a bigger market? Does he not like... Well, he certainly can't be unhappy about his role, because he's got a pretty cozy role. I feel like top 6 guy, lots of power play time, got to rack up a lot of points playing with Tage Thompson. Hard to envision that. Is it just the general dysfunction of Buffalo that he wants to be rid of? But is there anything that could happen in the next week that wins some of these guys over, whether it's Byram or Peterka or Alex Tuck, right, who is eligible to sign on July 1st? The next week is big in that respect too, right? I mean, you need to. That was the first thing Kevin Adams mentioned about Peterka at the deadline. We're going to need to explain to him how we plan to make this team better. And if he's not sold on that, that's where. Now, has JJ Peterka at 23 years old earned the right to be like, he's only been here for 3 years. Like, how does Tage Thompson feel? How does Rasmus Dahlin feel? How does, Alex Tuck, who's going on 30, feel about, all the losing? That probably carries more weight than the 23-year-old who's sick of losing after a couple seasons and doesn't exactly contribute to winning in terms of the way he plays away from the puck. So, but still, if you got to win him over, you got to win him over. And what will Kevin Adams do in the next week to win anybody over? The fans, the players, we'll see.
Let me give a shout out to my friend Jamie. Just sent a text looking at here on my watch. This might sound familiar to you, Matt Fairburn. He says, Peterka for Schneider and Cooley. Does that sound familiar?
It sounds rich.
Sounds rich. But
it does sound familiar, but it
sounds familiar.
it's too
a deal centered around. I'm just saying, like, that's the type of twofer that I would do, and I would level it out. Kevin Adams did mention today that he has, I don't think he said a wealth of prospects. I don't think he would ever go as far to say that, but he does have currency. When talking about moving up, right? He said you usually need, like, I think it was Jerry who said you need to have 2 1s to move up, but they did mention that they have some prospects. That's another indication. Not that the Rangers necessarily want one. But no, that's the type of move that I'd look to make. Doesn't have to be a Rasmus Anderson, right shot D. I would look at a Schneider, but I love Cooley. You know that. I had to get one last plug in because I've been so inside baseball type of stuff for that. I think the first, this was a few months ago, probably. I was like, this is the type of deal that I would do for Peterka. So I'm glad, Jamie, you're smart. That's all I want to say. I want to give a shout out to Jamie.
Schneider, I think would be exactly what they're looking for. Cooley, same thing, exactly what they need. I mean, if there was a deal that you could build to get both of them and you're only giving up Peterka and futures, I think it'd be a home run. But just seems like those are guys that the Rangers don't want to move. Like, they'd probably rather move Keandre Miller. And
yeah, tough shit.
But
it's got to hurt.
The Sabres would rather move Quinn than Peterka, right? Like,
right, exactly.
That's life. I don't know. You got to give to get. And so that's where, when push comes to shove, will a deal get done? I don't know. It was fascinating exercise going through it with Shayna about which teams would make sense, who could use them. It's like, well, we're going to have to narrow down this list to the teams that could actually make it happen, right? Like, who could use them? I don't know, almost anybody. Not quite everybody, but almost, would at least kick the tires on it. But when you look at cap situations, who would want to absorb a long-term deal for him? Who has the pieces that could help the Sabres, like the type of guys that they need? The Devils were another team that came up. Nemec, Dawson, Mercer, like they've got some pieces that could definitely.
It's compelling. And
probably have a need, for some top 6 scoring help. Move Timo Meier back, over to the right. Kind of an interesting team. Utah is an interesting one. You brought up Chicago, who didn't make our list just because we thought they didn't have the pieces. But when you bring up the 3rd overall pick,
come on, let's go.
All of a sudden, it's like, we could play ball with that. Like, all of a sudden, you're talking about getting Martone or Hagens.
And stop right there. Those are the only 2. Just stop right there, right?
Or
because listen,
probably.
I don't want to do that because like part of what I'm thinking with Peterka is, we've been saying it for a while, you got to make your team better. You're delaying making your team better if you make that trade with Chicago, but you're not going to get the chance if you stay at 9, in my opinion, to get either a true number 1 centerman or just a guy who's 6'3", he's going to play hard-nosed hockey, whose skating has improved tremendously, in my opinion, over the past couple of years. We're talking about Martone, that plays that dog style. And I'm willing to really strongly consider that. That's the exception on a futures type of deal that I would consider for Peterka.
And Soupy brings up Murphy from
we
Chicago.
Talked about him last week. Yeah,
he's a
talked
beast.
about him last week.
And but to your point on Martone, I would also say that while it's maybe not the optimal development approach, it's also not far-fetched to think that he could play in the league next year.
I don't want him to.
Is he making your team better next year? I don't know. I think everybody would rather, if you had a guy like Martone, maybe not everybody, but a lot of fans seeing guys get rushed to the league would rather he get the appropriate amount of time, if only because they would like to see an addition from the outside that forces him to, right? They don't want the roster to be built in such a way that he could win a job the way Benson did. Like that was one of the fatal flaws of Kevin Adams' entire regime, is not that Benson won the job, it's that the job was there to win. Like Benson won it fair and square, but it probably never should have been there to win. I don't think it's hurt Benson in any way. I just think that shouldn't have been the only new guy in their forward group that year. And so I understand like the idea of Martone going right into the lineup. I only say that to say like this guy played at Worlds for Team Canada. He already carries himself like a pro. He could handle it. It's just probably not the way to. It's probably not the way to develop a player, right? It's not. The
you know what he can also do is go to college for a year.
He could,
and send him down to Penn State. Go play, little Pagulaville South. Put him down there.
Tabs on him.
Play with Jackson.
4
Smith.
hours away.
Yeah, I mean you can do something like that. I would consider that's the only situation that I would consider. I think unless. You make a bigger deal with Utah at 4. But other than that, I think you got to go, kind of to those 12 teams. So the story that Matthew is talking about, that's at theathletic.com/Sabres that he penned on Monday morning with Shayna Goldman, discusses 12 teams that Matthew and Shayna came up with as potential suitors. Chicago was not one of them. Huge miss. No, I'm just kidding. Just busting your chops. Got to do it. But no. And I think that, like I said, I think there could be at least half the league that would be in on this, that would want to at least look at it, consider it. To your point, a lot of teams could use a player like this. And I don't think it's like very often that a player of Peterka's upside to get him out of Buffalo factor. Who knows what this player could be, right? 23?
23.
68 points?
68 big ones.
Knocking on the door, 30 goals.
Tell you about the 68 points. They don't want. Never mind what he does when he doesn't have the puck. It's all about those.
Doesn't
points.
matter. Doesn't matter. It's well established that underlying metrics don't matter in hockey. I'm kidding. We are 43 minutes in. Wow, time has flown by. If you could please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on Twitter, come over to YouTube. The chat's moving. I haven't really been looking at it. I think Matthew has. So thank you for that, Matthew. We'll take care of the chat momentarily. Wanted to go back to Kevin Adams' press conference real quick. I did jot down a couple things. We covered a lot of it already. 2 things maybe to talk about briefly. One, was it the Samuelson thing? It wasn't like my biggest takeaway was the assistant coaching staff. They're under contract and there's nothing really imminent there. It sounds like he's open to adding, but it didn't sound like there was a lot of potential subtraction on the table, because my opinion is that it would have happened by now if there was.
It's the same.
What's the deal there? What's your read?
Yeah. The same answer that I got whenever we sat down for the story I wrote, which we sat down sometime in May, and this answer was very similar. It was like, well, we could add and we're evaluating, and could something happen? Maybe, but it sounds like if something happens, it's an addition and that nobody will necessarily be fired. And that's a decision. I mean, some of these guys have been here for a while. Like Marty Wolford's been here since 2021. How does everybody feel about how Owen Power has done, in that time? Or Matthias Samuelson? These two important young defensemen. Henry Okiharu, went sideways, it felt like. So who among the defensemen besides Rasmus Dahlin has taken a step forward? And Rasmus Dahlin's a number one pick. So I don't know. I mean, the power play, the penalty kill, they both sucked last year and have for a while. So I guess I don't know how you really justify that, but it's somewhat like, I feel like Kevin Adams was a little bit talking out of both sides of his mouth, because it's like he said Lindy Ruff, whoever he brings in, he's got to trust, right? He's got to really trust them. And yet, last year, he took over a coaching staff where he'd never worked with any of them. How much trust was built up there? So it's like he didn't get to pick his own coaches last year, and now one whole year in the foxhole with these guys, and he's built up so much trust that he's got to be careful about who he brings in. And yet half the league has changed out at least one coach on their bench, and the Sabres
had 79 points.
Right. So it's between that and, I mean, hardly anything has changed about this group. They brought in a new strength coach who comes with rave reviews. I'm sure he'll be an improvement. I don't know. Like, I didn't think Ed Gannon was doing a bad job. I think Ed Gannon, in the conversations I've had with him, is a pretty bright guy. Was he missing some things? Could they have done a better job? Apparently so, or they think that they can. So we'll see. Like I said, the new strength coach comes with quite a track record and quite a reputation around hockey. So that could very well be a good move. But when you have as bad a power play and as bad a penalty kill as they've had, those are the two biggest tactical things that coaches can impact, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And they're also probably the biggest difference maker between being a below average team and a team that can squeak into the playoffs. Like, you could ride a good power play to the playoffs. And how many points did they piss away because of the power play and the penalty kill? Probably a lot. So sure, if that's the line they want to go with and that's what they want to sell, then sure, we'll see. Maybe they can add somebody else at some point. Maybe they've tried and people don't want to work for them. I don't know. But the idea that it's just guys that Lindy trusts, or that, they've got a great coaching staff, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it was Donnie's fault a couple years ago. It was Ed Gannon's fault, I guess, this year. And we'll see if the boys are feeling a little stronger in third periods this year, I guess.
One name to throw on the radar. So number one, I think Jay McKee, we talked about it earlier in the postseason. He has re-upped 3-year deal, stay as bench boss up for the Bulldogs in the OHL. I think Stu Barnes left the Tri-City Americans in WHL about 3.5 weeks ago, and I don't think he's landed anywhere yet. He's the owner of that franchise, or part owner. He's been head coach on the team for a while. I don't think he's landed anywhere, but when he left on May 30th, Barnes said he is pursuing other professional opportunities. Okay. Buffalo? Maybe.
He's got trust with Lindy, right?
He's got trust with Lindy. Just want to throw that out there. Food for thought. I don't know. Could be interesting. Could be nothing. Could be me just making shit up. We'll see. But that's a name that I would maybe understand if they had some dialogue with. I don't know. But I do want to talk about the draft. Let's just kind of shift gears real quick. There was more. Is there anything else on the press conference?
One other thing.
Yeah. Because I don't want. I'm
press conference that I
getting
found
bored with Kevin's presser.
That I found interesting is that Jarmo Kekalainen will be based in Columbus. Not entirely unusual, I will say, for that role, but notable. I think people would probably prefer that he's in the building. living here,
Yeah.
but he'll be in the building a lot, even though he's not living here, would be my expectation. Something people had asked me about, though, so I wanted to point that out. Laura Pagula's involvement was brought up and probably didn't make people feel great that, although, again, I don't know how you win an answer like that, but she's been around a lot more and going to Board of Governors meetings and hanging out in scouting meetings and just getting a lay of the land. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. People seem to
Are we
think
going to
it's a
be
bad
upset
thing,
about an owner being involved in their team?
in fact, I think people should, if anything, take it as any outside voice that Terry Pagula might listen to, I think should be a good thing. Any sort of somebody to balance him out in some way. It won't necessarily be a good thing, but
Just saying it is what it is.
nobody trusts Terry Pagula. So,
right.
I mean, I don't know. He needs somebody to help him out, preferably somebody that has a little bit more hockey experience. But again, this is kind of why I wrote the story at the beginning of June, like Kevin's that guy for him. So,
yeah.
But her involvement, I think, was notable, something that people were kind of curious about. The only other thing that made, and we can then spin into some of what Jerry Fortin said and talk about the draft. Levi, non-committal, I guess, on him being in the NHL, but there seemed to be a certain comfort level with the possibility. So we'll see what they decide to do in net, but it's sort of an undercover storyline, I guess, this summer. But there's a good chance they just run it back with what they have.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I think you got to bring someone in, bring a tweener in, a guy that you're comfortable waiving if Levi does win the job, but create some competition. Don't go into the season behind the 8 ball in a very important position. I know it's not a super great free agent class, but the goaltending in Buffalo wasn't super great last year. And I'm including James Reimer's last season heroics, late season heroics, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, let's just get over it. Is he retired yet, Reimer? Could you imagine if they brought him back? Like, I don't know if that's.
He is not officially retired. He's not officially retired.
I know I was being facetious, but it's like it's almost like make the decision easier by retiring.
With a new strength and conditioning staff, can they squeeze another good year out of him? I don't know.
I just remember how Reimer looked at the beginning of the year.
Well, you remember how Reimer looked at sort of the tail end of that run too.
He was tired
where it finally ran out, and it was like, oh yeah, there it is. Like that's why they didn't ride this guy all year. But the way he played makes it. You saw the way the team played when he was playing that way. Granted, meaningless games, but they kept going back to him. Felt like a little bit of a message from Lindy Ruff of saying, I need somebody I can count on. And right now I can count on this guy. Is he going to go into the summer in a year that I don't want to say it's going to define his legacy, but it might be the last image of him, this season. His legacy is written. Like, he is one of the great coaches in the history of the sport. The best, one of the best this franchise has had, one of the icons of this franchise. But the last impression people have of him is going to be what he did with this team. Is he going to go into next year with Levi and Luukkonen? I don't know.
No, I think that's why you got to. I don't think you can, but I don't want to go.
Like he would trust that. But
let's save this for free agency because we're already an hour in, and I don't want to spend like too much more time here tonight. And I want to talk about the draft. If you don't mind, let's just shift. Let's do a hard shift. We're already an hour in, almost 53 minutes. Let's leave some meat on the bone on the goaltending. Picking 9. Kevin's open for business. I'd love to see them get creative, do something, then stay at 9. I think the more that I think about it, when you look organizationally in the prospect ranks, I was happy to hear that he said it. You and I have talked about it offline. Let's not look at the top club roster in terms of building a draft list or picking a player, regardless of where they're picking. Look at what you have in the pipeline right now. They lost a centerman on June 1st. They lost a winger, 2 wingers with Miedema and Von Barnekow, threw them back into the pool. Mariala, Maybe they just made a judgment on him that he's a great player, good prospect, signed with Edmonton pretty quickly, by the way. I just think that maybe he wasn't. Maybe it was an indication. If you look at them cutting Mariala loose and bringing in Tyler Kopf after his collegiate season last year as an undrafted free agent, big kid at 6'4", 200 plus pounds, kind of a moose, can skate. I think you're kind of getting an idea of the types of players that they're looking for. Mariala's not that. I think the Mariala thing was almost not gritty enough. Maybe doesn't have the compete level. Super skilled playmaker. Totally, to me, worth it. But maybe that was a sign that they have this character, like a type of player that they're looking for now. Organizationally, Matt, removing some of those guys, 3 players that they were currently on the depth chart. You're pretty good at center right now. You can always use more centermen, right? But you have Hellenius, you have Kulik, you have Austin, you have Kozak. I think Costantini, Buglin, Shodin, non-factors moving forward. Left wing, I'm feeling comfortable between the youth that you have on the top club roster. I said you don't look at it, but you do have, some guys who play left wing that are pretty fresh, But Wahlberg, Rosén, Poltapov, Neuchev, Kopf. Beneath that, Kizikov, Bernson, Carlson, non-factors in all likelihood. Kizikov likely, we don't know what's going to happen with him, right? But pretty clear that he's not part of the plans moving forward. Right wing, all of a sudden, you're really light on. So I think right wing becomes kind of an area to look at in terms of building some depth. Right D might be, outside of center, your strongest pipeline position with Sturbach, Kleber, Komarov, Gavin McCarthy, and I'll throw Brunet in there, who's going to go play in the NCAA soon. Lefty might be an area that you might be able to work on and add a body at a pretty high pick. Ryan Johnson, Nikita Novikov, Luke Osborne, and then you have Sean Cohane, Gary, and Panoka, which we'll see what happens with those bottom 3. But I just wanted to kind of set the table there. They need to get bigger up front, and I think they want to get bigger regardless if they go right shot, left shot on the blue line. We got some predictions. We got some thoughts on how they might act. What are you feeling draft-wise coming into Friday night?
I think they make a pick.
You do?
I think
they might not. They might not.
That's why I feel like that's a little bold, right?
All right.
I think they make a pick.
Where?
I think it's probably going to be at 9. I think it's going to I think the betting odds would tell you the history of the NHL is that they won't be able to move up or move the pick, even if those are the 2 preferred situations. So Jerry Fortin said today that he views it as kind of a 5 to 7 player draft at the top before it starts to drop off. So initially, my first thought upon hearing that was well, have you thought about trading up? Well, I asked Kevin, have you sensed any sort of willingness from teams up top to maybe move down? But it's just a hard trade to envision when we don't see it a lot. They do have the pieces to make it work, though. They do have prospects. They do have, we're talking about, Jerry Fortin did say, you don't usually see that unless it's some sort of major trade. Well, Jerry, funny you say that, because the Sabres have, 2 of the top 7 players on CJ's trade board, both of whom I would say would constitute major trades. So, you could use one of those guys to move up. So Corey Pronman had Higgins and Martone falling to 8 and 9 in one of his recent mocks. Higgins 8, Martone 9. I'm waiting to see what Corey's mock draft looks like as we get closer. He'll probably have one more, I think. I don't know that for sure, but I think he'll have another one. And the guy is nails. The guy, he's plugged in. He was all over Shane Wright not going 1 when everybody said he was going 1. I was fresh on the NHL beat, and I thought, this guy over here, he knows his shit. So when he put out that Higgins and Martone at 8 and 9, I thought, this is coming from somewhere, right? This is some intel. And then I immediately thought, wow, this is best case scenario for the Sabres. One of those 2 players. we may have some disagreement here. Like for me, it's Higgins all day if they're both sitting there. I like both, but they're two of my favorite guys in the whole draft. And if they were sitting there at 8 and 9, I think would be a super, super exciting scenario. How does that happen? Mertka goes top 8 and Jake O'Brien goes top 8, and then it's in play. Not saying it would for sure happen, but I think Brady Martin, I've stopped even considering him because I just feel like he's not going to make it there. You know, he went out to dinner with Nashville, Boston, Philly, and Utah at the combine, 4, 5, 6, and 7. He is that guy that hockey guys will get in a room with and be like, this, they fall in love with that type of kid. The work ethic, the personality, not to mention his game, the physicality. He says all the right things. He does all the right things. He'll
probably play wing though.
Maybe.
I think
maybe.
he's gonna play wing.
That's what, that would change the calculus a little bit. Mertka, I don't know. Like, does he go top 8? Ultimately, we're probably just pipe dreaming here, right? Like the idea that Higgins or Martone could possibly be there, but that's why you talk about the idea of, moving up, because man, if they start to fall, I say Higgins because I don't know if there's a number 1 center in the organization right now that Tage Thompson's on the wing.
Higgins would make a lot of sense. Higgins, I just don't see the 8 and 9 scenario that Corey had. And I know what you're saying, because of his network and the information, it just doesn't make sense in this class. If Jerry Fortin is saying 5 to 7 and Higgins and Martone are not 5 to 7, then that list is not right. I'm talking about Corey's list. It's not right. Because Higgins and Martone are in the 5 to 7. Period. End of story. So I think, to your point, I'd rather see another mock. I'd rather look at Wheeler's that he put out today, because that's not the situation that you want to be in if you're the Sabres, I don't think.
Well, that's kind of a worst case scenario that Wheeler laid out today.
And it might be more realistic, potentially, right?
It could be. I mean, we'll see.
I'm not knocking Corey, by the way. I'm just saying, I think he's got one more sketch to put out.
And that's the mock draft game, right? Like, some years you're going to nail it, some years you're going to miss. You're not going to bat 1,000 on these things. Wheeler has it going: Schaefer, Misa, Frondell, Denoyer, Martone at 5, Brady Martin at 6, Higgins at 7, Jake O'Brien at 8, leaving the Sabres with Radim Mertka at 9.
Okay.
So in this scenario, let's just zoom in on this scenario, because I would say we're both in agreement that really if Martone or Higgins are there, they're no-brainers. I'd even maybe throw Brady Martin into that bucket. You're looking at that. That's what you're rooting for on draft day, one of those guys to fall. After that, Jake O'Brien doesn't do it for me, because I think skill set wise, he's a little redundant. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't see some of the differentiating factors that would make him, and maybe this is zeroing in too much on the physicality component of things, not my preferred option, I guess. And he's gone in this version. So
yeah, no, he's a very impressive offensive playmaker. I think there is redundancy a little bit. I mean, he could be a top centerman. I think his skating will get better. I just think his playmaking instincts are really, really, really good. Super cerebral, like smooth. Like when he passes the puck, man, everything is flat with that kid. So from that sense, I mean, I wouldn't have a huge problem with him. I think he's getting a little steam from teams. I think with others that may have had questionable interviews, I don't think he was one of them. I just think he's kind of knows how to play the game, and I think he did pretty well for himself. But so here's where I'm at. Like, Mertka would almost be a safe pick for the Sabres. They would have a luxury. It would be a luxury pick because you have Sturbach, Kleber, Komarov in your pipeline. McCarthy, to a lesser extent, I know he's a 3rd-round pick. He's not chopped liver. I think he could be a really good depth guy for you, and he might play someday. blocks a ton of shots. We talk about that warrior mentality. He's a piss pot out there. He's got good size, doesn't back down, brings a stick up on guys. Like, I think he's got a little bit of that snarl that we don't talk about enough with Gavin McCarthy. Not an afterthought, I guess is what I'm saying. Komarov's the guy there that maybe gets too much love. Gets a lot of shots through, though. He's got a lot of offense. Like, he does a lot of good things. I think he plays big. Skating, you kind of worry about, right? But I mean, long story short, though, they have guys that are in there that are cooking, and you're fine. You add Mertka to that, you are rock solid in terms of right-handed defensive prospects for a while. I go back to right wing when I look at this list. Brody Ziemer, Jake Richard, Sardarian, who probably not completely out of the picture. I know it's kind of, if you go on Puckpedia, they removed him from the Sabres page. We'll talk about that. Nadeau, Zelenov. That's it. That is not outside of Ziemer. Ziemer to me is like the only like really sure thing. Jake Richard had a great season. Not a sure thing.
No.
You know what's a sure thing to me in this draft class? Who's a right winger and competes and gets to the net, and he might not be the biggest guy. I keep going back to Victor Eklund. And that's going to drive Sabres fans bonkers. But I'll argue that I've seen him more than most Sabres fans that would go bonkers. And I'm not being that guy. I'm just saying, seen him enough to not worry about him at all.
I think I would argue that you've seen him more than anybody who would go bonkers.
I don't.
You're being modest. You're being.
I don't know what people are doing. I'm just saying I don't know what
That's
people are
true.
doing.
That's true. You don't know how people are spending their time.
But what I'm saying is I've watched him enough for a while now to be very comfortable if they took him. And I don't care that he's 5'11 and a half and presently weighs 165 pounds. I don't care. I really don't care. You got 9 other picks and you can go really hard. The player that we're not talking about yet in this whole thing is Roger McQueen. McQueen's right there. I don't know. I don't have insight in the medical. I don't know.
It seems like the medical, like he's feeling fine. And there was it's not like a muscular issue in the back. And so I think I feel okay about that.
I go back and forth on him. Like I go back and forth on the thought, Matt, that they could afford to take the swing.
They could.
And they could. I go back and forth on that. Yeah. Okay.
But their prospect pool is not as good as it was a few years ago. It was middle of the pack in Scott Wheeler's latest rundown, I think 15th or 16th. And because a lot of the guys are in the NHL, a lot of the guys that would be prospects on other teams, maybe Benson or whoever else are, these really young guys are in the NHL. So they can afford to take the risk, but you'd also really like to hit on this pick and strengthen your pipeline with some more, Kulik's already up. So you've got Ostlund as looking like a potential NHLer. And I think I like some of the defensemen that you mentioned, right? Wahlberg maybe gets there if he can sign Poltapov. Like there's still some good players in their prospect pool, but as far as like legit potential difference makers, that's what top 10 picks are for, right? That's where you find those players. And so McQueen, you pointing out Eklund doesn't drive me crazy because it's like, first of all, he's 5'11 and a half. It's not that small. It's taller than me. He could be 6 foot by the fall at 5'11 and a half. He's only 18 years old. Like, height is not too big of a deal. You'd like for him to put on some weight, but 180-pound hockey players can make a difference. Compete is what matters. He's like a right-handed Benson, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
You'd be happy with more Bensons on the team. Well, we would. I don't know if everybody in the chat always agrees with us on that. We get a lot of we get some people that are down on Benson, but I don't have a problem with Eklund. I would almost throw out the medical on McQueen. Not entirely throw it out, but like if I'm having the conversation at the draft table, I'm saying let's throw that out. Let's debate these players. Like who's the better player? Who's more of what the Sabres need? And then you bring in medical and kind of if it's so close that you need to break a tie. Those are probably the forwards though, right? Like it would have to be one of those guys if you're in this spot, the way it fell in Wheeler's mock draft. So the other options are you're getting into, I guess is that Carter Bear territory? It's too high probably, right? Like there's a drop off here.
Look, I mean, I like Bear. I don't have problems. I've mentioned this. I think after the lottery when you and I together, I love him. Not probably at 9. Not probably at 9.
It's also Aitchison territory.
It's Aitchison territory. It's actually Jackson Smith territory. Bigger, more, just slicker with the puck. I like Aitchison though. I think Aitchison's would be perfectly fine. A lot of his look, when I look at the left and the right shot D, actually I need a lefty more, but in the prospect ranks. But again, when you factor in, Dahlin and Power, and it's like, who knows what the hell's going to happen with Byram? Do you really, maybe if you're trading Byram,
Samuelson,
things move up. But like when I look just at the prospect ranks, Bryson, right? Yeah. You had to go there. I see a kind of a need for, one more guy. I could go either way. At the end of the day.
How about this idea from Wayne? He wants Aitchison converted to left wing. Would be exactly what the Sabres need. It's not wrong. The way he plays. I don't know.
I'll tell you what, a lot of his action, like he likes to sprint out of the zone and race up ice and get involved. And sometimes he's the first guy out legging forwards on his own team, getting up ahead of them, crossing the red line before them. He likes, I think I've said this before on this show. I like the way that he reads the play and he sneaks back door. Like I've seen people say that Aitchison's offense might not. I think it's going to be fine, especially with creative forwards and just, the way that you move the puck around, positionless hockey concepts and everything. He's a great guy for that. I could understand Aitchison. I don't think they would do it ahead of Mertka. I think that they saw a lot of Mertka.
Jerry Fortin's. I mean, he was asked directly about two players, so I don't read too much into him heaping praise on either one. But the way he spoke about them specifically, like comparing and contrasting to one another, like, did you read much into like one answer maybe pointing them in one direction over the other?
I think he definitely has an appreciation for Mertka's route, and it tends to think that as this kid gets more comfortable in North America and you put resources around him, that his game is going to go to this next level. And here he is, a 6'6" kid, and they just saw him play a shit ton because he was playing up in front of Ratzlaff for half a year. That they probably have some really good information on him. The way that he spoke about Aitchison was glowing too. Throwback, old school. That's what you need.
The one thing he said there was that might be, and we had just, I had just asked him about the toughness component at the top of the draft and teams trying to build more like the Panthers. And so he was talking about how sometimes there can be a recency bias where teams, and there are players in this draft that fit that. And he mentioned, and then he's talking about Aitchison, and he brought up he could fall into that recency bias.
That's also, though, he could get overdrafted.
Well, that's why I brought up that portion of his answer is he was saying he loves the player, but he could fall into that. And that to me said, okay, so maybe not 9. Now that's, again, we read between the lines at this time of year, right? That's what we do. But Mertka's been tied to them quite a bit. Wheeler's had them connected for a while. So I think if they were between those two guys, that's probably... And Kevin Adams says you can never have enough right shot defensemen. And like you said, it's kind of the safe pick, but I wouldn't think a bad one. But McQueen and Eklund end up being kind of an interesting draft table conversation that they can have in the big fancy draft room now, and they can all yell it out because they're not going to be at the table on draft day.
I have no information that suggests that the Sabres like Eklund, but he does fit. I'm telling you, like in terms of that firecracker, he fits. Said it before, I'll say it again. It's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog. And he is that guy. For me, I just like the way he plays. Someone's going to get a good player there. May very well not be Buffalo. How likely is it that they move up for Brady Martin? Who do you got to jump ahead of? Because I do think that Brady Martin would be a very good add to this mix. Because again, when I look, it's about physicality, compete. Fortin said it today. You and I talked about it this morning before the press conference, right? There's a type when you're building a team that they have to target. That's what draws me back into Eklund. He is the type that I think they need. What I will say about Brady Martin, he can play center. We know that. Great. If I think he's going to be a wing, great. He's a right chat. He'll play right wing. Again, right wing. If you add him to the stable where you have Brody Zemer, makes a lot of sense. Do you have to move up to get him? Do you like him enough where you just go up and take the thought out of it and not wait for him to fall? That's a possibility for me. Got to get up to what? 5?
Maybe
4? We know
Maybe
3
4.
and 4 are in play, right? Chicago, Utah. Is 4 too high? I don't know. If a player you like, who gives a shit? Go get him.
4's too high because I'm taking Hagens if he's on the board at 4.
I agree with you. I agree. Well, okay, here's the thing, though. Take the thought of making not a mistake, but maybe like where you have to really have this conversation about McQueen and make a decision. They're already made the decision. He's either on their board or he's not.
Right.
In the range, right? But if it's a 5 to 7,
get in there.
And
get in there.
Get in there.
Go get one of those guys because we talked about it after the Cousins trade, but by trading Cousins, their highest drafted forward on their roster right now is Jack Quinn, right? And I mean, you look at where the best players in the league get drafted, it's at the very top, the whole, like, Florida's roster was built in a somewhat unconventional way, but a lot of their difference makers were top 7 picks. Like, where was Kachuk? 7, 8, 6, somewhere in there. Barkov, super high. Reinhart, number 2 overall pick. Bennett, number 4 overall pick. Like, you can find them wherever, but it doesn't hurt to be finding that difference-making talent. Like, I don't know. When I saw that from Pronman, I thought, wow, the idea that Hagens could fall feels like a big mistake to me from the league. If that happens. If he's outside of the top 5, if he's outside of the top 4, I'm calling every team from 5 until I'm on the clock as long as Hagens is there. And I'm trying to make something happen. Because I just think that's a potential number 1 center that you don't know that you have at this point. And I like, he's not the biggest guy, but I think he has the requisite compete level and push back and all those things. And he didn't light the world on fire in college hockey, but he didn't have a bad year by any means on, playing in a tough conference. So
just because he wasn't Macklin Celebrini or Fantilli or it doesn't mean that he's not a good prospect. He is the guy. So I came into the season just saying, you watch all the prospects all year, you know what they're missing in the pipeline. Porter Martone fits that, but what they're also missing in the pipeline, to your point, is a number 1 centerman. Hagens is over analyzed because he's been the guy for so long. And I think there are teams that are going to make a mistake on him. If Buffalo can get him, great. If you move up and you're in this Martone Hagens thing and they go Hagens, I could totally justify it as much as I like Martone. 100% with you on that. And I'd love to see it. Go up and get the guy. Don't sit there. Don't move back. You got assets. Get aggressive. Be convicted. I'd love to see that. I don't want to listen. I'd be shocked if one of those guys falls in it. Shocked. I just don't see it. And
We were a little
I'll tell you what,
surprised at Benson falling as far as he fell too. So sometimes it happens, but you don't want to sit there and hope. Hope is a pretty shitty strategy. Somebody once said.
that's right. Jason's. It's like you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Right. It was like
Right.
Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott, and I have it written on my whiteboard, and it says Chris Baker. I'm the third leg of that. I'd like to see who it was. Like someone else, Jason Zucker, Matthew Fairburn. No, so that's where I'm at. Look, other names. I wish we could get another one in, but we're not going to be able to. We'll be having a lot of this conversation tomorrow on Sabres Live. I'll be on with Duffer and Marty at noon. I wish we could do another one because I have these day two guys. Just like for day two, some names that I just want to throw out there. I'm looking for
Get your notebooks out, folks.
I'm looking for forecheck. I'm looking for, I'm not going to go too deep, but the types of players that I want, I probably would go heavy forward, but there's like big burly defenseman too. David Bedkowski played for Owen Sound, grew up watching the Bruins, bullies, intimidating, tough, mobile, safe, right shot, another right shot. But he's a guy that if I go forward, I'd be happy to get him in not 39, but maybe later. But in the second round, Ethan Zada, Eddie Genberg, two guys that I would definitely really look hard at if they're available. They should be. Forecheck, beasts, don't care about their points. They'll get them. Team value, unafraid, getting your hands dirty, body, shoulder, forearm to the face, all that shit. Love it. Old school. Let's play hockey. Those are two guys that I really like there. I'm not going to go too deep. I did, like I mentioned on an earlier podcast, I do have a couple knuckleheads, I do think that, but these are guys that they could also maybe not bring in, via draft. There's a couple guys late that they could maybe pick up, as like undrafted, like invites, but they have a couple 7th rounders to just burn some lottery tickets on. Use a 7th rounder on a lunkhead.
Absolutely.
Okay?
That's what they're
Honestly,
for.
use a 7th rounder on a lunkhead. Aiden Foster is one of my favorite lunkheads. Go look at some. He gets punched in the face a lot, but he can give a lot too, and he likes to run through guys. He's just reckless abandon. He's later on. I'm just going through. Like I have some names, and just guys that I like. We're gonna run out of time here, but I do think they'll take a goalie also mid round. I'm looking at Pareto, the kid from Tri-City, Storm. Really good, Linka Gretzky. I just think that he's big enough. He's got potential. I think Seamus Cotta could do some really good work with him, and he could be a longer road guy. Get another goalie in this draft. You have 10 picks. I don't know if they'll use them all. Max Westergaard is a player I like in the 4th round. Just another highly competitive guy, plays pro hockey over for the Frölunda system. I think that he's not the biggest guy, but again, compete, motor. You're not going to be able to maybe check both of those boxes of the compete, motor, fearlessness, and a guy that's 6'3.5. That's what I like about, like when I look at Genberg, I think he's coming in at 6'2", 194. Zada's right around the same, 6'1", closing in on 180. But those are two names that I want to look at early on day 2 on Saturday. They're really, and listen, that's how I was with in that Sturbach Wahlberg range. Kind of had a profile. And then that big kid from Michigan State too. I think he's going to be on the radar also. Played 4th line minutes as a freshman for Michigan State. I could see just with the whole connection with
They do love their
Nightingale. Yeah, I just think there's something there. So just a couple. I'm doing speed round here because we're already an hour and 20 in, and I kind of want to I got to get moving on to a couple other things here. That's why I wanted to start a little early. So thank you for accommodating me tonight, Matthew. I just did speed round. There's more. I have 20 guys that I really like for day 2, but I don't want to go through them all. I will throw out one other name, and he might be able to be gotten in the 4th or 5th round. I've mentioned his name in passing. He's another right winger, Aiden Lane, Brampton Steelheads, 6'1", 193, committed to Harvard. I think that when teams do their homework on this kid, I think teams that saw him that were going to scout Martone probably came away with this kid and they were just very impressed really good puck support, creative, gets to the net, likes, he makes contact to make plays. I think there's some like Zach Hyman type of potential in this kid, at least in terms of mindset and how he scores his goals. 4th round, 5th round for me, maybe. Thick, but it's more about the character, the team first mentality. The reason that, everything sounds great about the kid, right? It's just the skating needs to get more explosive with this kid, but I think the frame is there. I just like this kid a lot. I can go on and on, but he's another kid though, by the way. He was already set to go to Harvard before they changed the rules. And he went to Brampton he went to play for the Steelheads after. Like, he just said, okay, I'm gonna go play in the OHL, left prep, and good move for him. I think it got more eyes on him. Player, really, I've liked him for a while. I think that he could be really interesting. Again, skill set, culture to get integrated into this system. I'd be really curious to see if Sabres like him. I'm gonna shut up. This one's speed round. I'm running out of
It's always fun to hear the names you throw out there, write them down, because I feel like inevitably every year a couple of them end up being Sabres. So nobody's got
left
a better feel for
left shot D. Brady Peddle, another Michigan State commit. 4th.
Well, Michigan State. We gotta be mindful of the connections. Any Green Bay gamblers that could be. I
think we're tapped out on Leon.
Could be on their radar.
Yeah.
They like the program. Any guys at the program that maybe Brian Galvin, this new strength coach, could lend some insight into. Always got to be mindful of those connections.
And, late in the draft, we always like to maybe look at guys that were passed over. I will throw out Tanner Adams, plays for Providence. Not the biggest guy, but another just high. I think he's a kid who could play. I always like looking at those guys from Providence that I had
Bryson.
This big thing for Parker Ford. I'm actually going with the Parker Ford route on this one. I wanted to, he made his NHL debut this year for Winnipeg, by the way. I think he played a game, but I like looking at those guys. That kid's just relentless. He should have been drafted last year. He wasn't. I think a team will probably take a look at him. He's probably like close to 6 foot, 200 pounds, but just dog on a bone, relentless. That's what I'm looking for. Energy, compete. I want fewer, Rosanes, more just dogs. Start sprinkling them in. Start staggering, getting them into the pipeline. Get a couple from the OHL. Get a couple that are going to go to college route. Start sprinkling them in. And that's how you're going to change your culture over the long term.
Who's this? There's a Russian guy people were talking about.
Daniil Prokhorov. I like him.
That has some nastiness to his game.
Yuri Romo. He probably won't get drafted.
Maybe it was. I came across his name in his game and was kind of.
So I think Prokhorov's getting a lot of steam lately. 6'5", but I mean he's physical, but I don't know if we're necessarily going to call him nasty. I'm not sure.
Vaclav Nestreisel.
Oh yeah, he plays in the USA. So he's a kid from Muskegon. He's he played on a really good team this year. I think he's got a lot of potential. A kid like that with his skill set and should go higher than he is. I think I don't know how he interviewed. I'd be curious to see, because I'm pretty sure he's at the combine. He's going to be right in the range for where I think that you look at Genberg or you look at, Zada, he's going to be right in that range. I think he's going to be actually right there. I don't know. I think that there's a lot to like in the package. Skills there. He's 6'5", that kid.
Yeah,
you got his numbers up in front of you?
Yeah, what do you 6'5".
Yeah.
6'5" and a quarter, 187 pounds.
Yeah. Muskegon. I think he's right there in range too. I think there's people that like him more than I do personally. I thought he was a little inconsistent at times, but again, they're young kids. You know what I mean? And it's they're not all perfectly polished, and sometimes you got to just project the body. But no, he fits. I think he fits kind of what you're looking at. But I don't think he's got the same. Well, he does actually. When you really dig in, there's something. I have a comfort level like Genberg. I like his attitude. I like the way he speaks about his game. He's just confident, and that's a kid. He's just no bullshit. He's just gonna go out, lower his shoulder, love stirring it up. Loves driving through the body, going through the chest, hits to hurt. I like that. I'm looking for that on day 2. I'll take less of that at the first round. As long as you load up on day 2.
I was going to say that that's why people shouldn't panic necessarily if it's Eklund. And Eklund does have competitiveness, so I'm not saying he doesn't, but they shouldn't panic if the Sabres get somebody who's perceived as smaller or not that type, because I know you've said a bunch that you find those guys a lot of times on day 2. I think what makes, and it's why I asked Jerry Fortin this question about the Panthers today, what makes the Kachucks unique, or even I'd throw Barkov and Bennett into that mix. It's like to get the skill with the other stuff is rare. You know, to get the high end, top of the draft skill with high end nastiness that you're probably going to get in Martone and Martin. You know, it's hard to find. So that's where teams may overcorrect. That's why I have a hard time seeing either Martone or Martin on the board for the Sabres at 9.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to forecast. I think there could be some chaos, but at the end of the day, I want them to move up, just get one of their guys, be convicted. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't want them to take Eklund. I want them to go up and get a Martin, a Martone, a Higgins. One of those 3. That's really what I want. Will they? I don't know. We'll see. Cliffhanger. I'm going to end, Matt. I know we got the chat. Do you want to go through a couple things real quick? Because I kind of got to get out of here.
A lot of it we kind of hit on. We had, Mike Lipinski noted that Adams confirmed there was no coaching staff changes. We hit on that. I threw up a few of these just to reflect the sentiment of the chat here. Mikey C says today was another low moment for this hockey team. BIP 1812, can the front office pretend they want to win? And Kevin notes another PR masterclass from our favorite hockey team's GM. It's kind of, we hit on that when we talked about, like, it seems like every time Kevin Adams speaks, he just can't win people over. Like, nothing he says is gonna, and I'm not saying he did a great job today. I'm just saying it's hard for, it seems like these press conferences are a reminder that he is in the job, and that pisses people off enough that no matter what he says, he's not really going to come out on top. Anthony S. with a Jacob Bryson shout out said, if we get rid of every player who doesn't want to be here, we'll be left with a roster of only Jacob Bryson. Also, Michael Pakla should have mentioned it. Congrats to Alexander McGillney for getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame. That was a surprise today that he finally got the call.
Somewhere McGillney's sitting on his deck, smoking a Camel and getting ready to write his speech. Kevin Adams did say something today about, like, you can pay guys money and it doesn't always solve everything, like, about, right? I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't want to go too deep on that, but I did write that down as something that was interesting.
Yeah, he's like, you can't, if you pay somebody more money hoping that will make them happy, it's, risky, or whatever he said. It doesn't always work out that way.
All I know, do you have a comment? Is there a comment about Tuck at all anywhere in there? Because my only other thought right away is, like, if I'm Alex Tuck, I'm going JG Wentworth, 877 cash now. I think that's the number, right? Like, that's what he should be doing. Bend the Sabres over a barrel, capitalize on a desperate Kevin Adams, get that guaranteed max dollars in term right now, because whatever he gets will be tradable. That was my one thought that I was taking it away. He'll get what he wants. JG Wentworth here.
He should get plenty. Definitely. He's in a good position, and I think 5+ years at least. And I still think somewhere in that 8 to 9 is going to be a comfortable spot for Tuck.
Take his cash now. Take it with the Buffalo Sabres.
I would if I were him. I mean, I know you could get traded another time. Patrick Wolf brought up an interesting point. Is this time to use Peterka or Byram level player to target a legit goalie? I mean,
no,
I don't think they'll do that, but I wouldn't use Peterka to get a goalie. Byram, the only goalies I would do it for, maybe the only goalie is Jeremy Swayman, but that's
5 Fuck
It's
that.
it's a bit of a risky deal.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of money. It's coming off.
I like Swayman plenty. Listen, I like him, but not for the money right now. I'm not there.
Not for the money, not for the cost to acquire, not for the opportunity cost of the other holes you have on your roster.
I agree with Kevin when he says play better D and your goaltending gets better.
It feels like a
Team
move to try to end the drought, right? Like, let's find a goalie that can carry us to the playoffs. But that's maybe not the most sustainable route to building a consistent playoff team. Although ending the drought would be nice. So that's the majority of what I starred. There was a lot of other good chats. We threw up a few as we were talking about stuff. I tried to hit on stuff as they were coming up. Like hit on different topics. We hit a lot of different stuff today. So
yeah, I apologize to the chat. Normally we'd go through, spend a little more time with it. I think we went a little longer than we probably wanted to on the press conference today. Wanted to spend a little more time on the draft, but it's good. We killed some multiple birds here with a couple stones. I'm good, Matt. I wish we can go longer, but we cannot. I got to move on here with my evening, do a couple things. You got any plugs for your work at the Athletic that you want to get out?
I think we're running $1 a month special right now, and there'll be new Sabres content for you every day this week. And hopefully, there'll be lots of stuff from development camp and the draft, and hopefully lots of activity from Kevin Adams on the trade market, free agency. We got a whole stable of hockey reporters that I would put up against anybody in the business. So good time of year to get in at $1.
It's a good roster.
Month.
Not a lot of holes on that roster.
No.
Good roster.
Stephen Cantor asks if there will be a Baker Fairburn draft party in 2026. It's a good idea. We'll consider. Or maybe we'll do it on a night where we're not so busy. Maybe we should have a Baker Fairburn watch party for a road game or something.
There you go.
We'll
I'd be into that.
Cantor can organize it. I think Cantor owes you a drink. Still.
He does.
Very early on in the show.
Oh, so. I haven't forgotten. Yeah, it was about a year and a half ago, but I haven't forgotten. Got a little post-it note right here. All the people that have wronged me in life and owe me drinks. Stephen Cantor, you're on the list. It's like that. What was that movie? Billy Madison. Putting my lipstick on. All right. I'm going to get us out of here. Again, apologize for the abrupt ending. Apologize for the low chat. We will get back to more chat involvement next show. I promise we'll be back for free agency. There will not be a long gap between shows because after the draft, July 1, baby. July 1. Going to be fun. For Matthew Fairburn, who, again, you can find at theathletic.com/Sabres, for the production crew who is monitoring all the people that owe me a drink and want the Sabres to move up to 4.
4. Yeah, 4.
I'm Kris Baker. Thanks, everyone, for hopping in on short notice. We appreciate you guys showing up every week to the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. Hit that like button if you haven't already on your way out, and we'll see you next time.